All right, welcome to Buzz is Building with Joel Smith. Every Wednesday, he joins us for the last block of the show to provide 5 players with buzz that you need to keep an eye on heading into Week 10. Joel, what's going on, buddy?
Not too much. Talking lots of receivers today. So I feel like you'll like it. I'm excited for today. Ready to get going.
Perfect. All right, well, I am ready to strap in and talk some receivers as always. Give us the first player with some buzz building.
We'll stick with Thursday Night Football. I was listening to you and Nate talking about Courtland Sutton, the mishaps there. And you do bring up a really good point in terms of those design plays, in terms of the downfield shots, those screens, a lot of that Broncos offense. Sometimes when I research these things, I kind of go into it thinking I know the answer. And at first, I wasn't too panicked about Courtland Sutton. Sadly, after looking into it, I am more concerned, mainly because of 2 things. I was thinking like maybe it's the cornerback matchups, just different fluke games, that sort of thing. But the 2 things that stuck out to me is, one, how defenses are playing Bo Nix, particularly. Right now, it is a ton of zone coverage. So I feel like thinking back to like C.J. Stroud in his second year, those sophomore slumps, that sort of thing. They're playing Bo Nix 3rd highest in terms of zone coverage against them this year among quarterbacks. We saw it last week given Houston plays very little man coverage, but against Bo Nix, it was down to 10%. He's got the Raiders tomorrow, which is at 13% man coverage, so they're also super low. So that's what Bo Nix has been good against, but more particularly Sutton and Franklin, especially their volume there.
Yeah, and oh man, it's such a great point because Bo Nix was one of the quarterbacks when Nate and I did the show a few weeks ago, where it was highlighting the guys who were more efficient throwing against different types of coverages. And Bo Nix was one of those guys that was very heavily skewed towards man coverage. Zone coverage numbers were kind of a disaster. I'm not sure how much of that is a Bo Nix thing and how much that is also just these wide receivers. Like Courtland Sutton is one of the guys that when I'm charting receivers for reception perception, the gap between his success rate versus man and zone is rather wide. Like he is definitely one of these really like true X receivers on the boundary, on the line of scrimmage, doesn't move around a lot. So it's more important for him to be good against man coverage, right? Like that matters more for him and his individual player success because he's going to get more of those isolated routes. But at the same time, the league is very zone heavy. Teams can zone you up, and that can be a little bit of a problem. And even Franklin, who I'm curious what you think of the Troy Franklin kind of splits as we're showing on the screen right now, out producing Courtland Sutton. He is also one of these guys, like you mentioned, a bit more of a man coverage player. At least in my opinion, I think he's a bit more of a man coverage guy than a zone player, even though he has mostly been their slot guy, which is a little hard to square.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that is one of the major problems with it too. Like I mentioned, both of them have been getting a lot of volume in terms of man coverage when they do play it. Sutton is top 10 in targets per route against man, but Franklin's number 4 right now. So it's not like Sutton is really getting all or dominating because Franklin is also there. And the big thing that sticks out to me with that is that first read target share. When we're looking at last year, Sutton had 31%, one of the best in the NFL. Franklin was down to 13%. And it's been going up and up and up for Franklin, where right now they are dead even, 23% to 22%. But this last month, Franklin's actually been up to 27%. Sutton's been below 20%. So it's not as much of like, Franklin will be good in zone, but once we get those teams with man coverage, then it's going to be Sutton's day. It's like more of that 50-50. So he'll have his weeks. Like he's still going to have those weeks where he has those ceiling games, obviously has tons of touchdown upside, but I don't think it's going to be consistent, especially with teams just playing so much zone coverage against the Broncos.
And I think the bad news that I have for Courtland Sutton managers is that I kind of think, number one, this is just more of who Courtland Sutton is. I view him as more of like a guy that is a good number one. You can get away with him being your number one, but do you necessarily want him to be that full load-bearing receiver? I don't know about that. Just me personally, my evaluation. Again, good number one receiver, but he's not quite that elite or great tier. And I also think even though the Broncos offense is still struggling, they need kind of more players to step up, right? They can't just be what they were last year, was all Courtland Sutton all the time. But that's going to account for some of these games where he has 3 single-digit or single-catch games this year, does Courtland Sutton. Now, one of them was last week where he scored, his one catch was a 30-yard touchdown. That's great. But I think that does lower his floor on a weekly basis. So this is one to definitely monitor. I'm glad you brought this one up. And my last point about this, and Nate and I have been talking about Pat Bryant forever now, but he can be an answer against zone coverage. I do think at some point they're going to want him to get ramped up a little bit more. Maybe it is next season, but as that big slot receiver, he could be more of an answer against zone coverage. So just continue to monitor him as maybe like a second half of the season rookie breakout player. But let's stick at wide receiver here. Let's get to your second player with some buzz.
We're going to go Rashid Shaheed. I was preparing early for this one, but it was not for Shaheed. I was actually going to talk about Torrey Horton. I was excited to talk about Torrey Horton in this offense and no Cooper Kupp. And I compared him on Monday morning to Shaheed in this offense, in this Kubiak offense. Then they go out and trade for Shaheed. So I already had the numbers planned and everything for Shaheed to talking about him. But he only had 6 games last year when he played in this Kubiak offense because of that injury. But up until that point, number 1 in the NFL in air yards. His target share in general was pretty solid. And this is just a way better version of that New Orleans offense last year with Sam Darnold. His yards per attempt right now, best from the decade. They're playing a ton under center, number 1 in the NFL. They're number 1 explosive plays off those play action. In general, just it's perfect for Shaheed. Where when we're looking at the screen, like yards per route last year was 27th. He was the wide receiver 22. It was volatile. He definitely had some floor games. But when he does have those ceiling games, it's huge.
Yeah, he's going to have monster weeks here. And I do think that Torrey Horton will still be involved, definitely from a fantasy standpoint. This decreases the odds that he's going to be that second half rookie receiver that you need because Shaheed knows the system. He's got a clear role here to just walk right into. But like, where do you think Rashid Shaheed's going to end up being in kind of your rest of season, weekly rankings? Like, is he somebody we can rely on to get 6 to 7 to 8 targets a game, or do you think you're going to be kind of relying on more of those big plays?
I think a mix of both. A lot depends on Cooper Kupp and that injury, I would say, but I think he can still get like 7 targets and be good, like be a good flex on 7 targets. And some of it is more of the matchup. Like I was pointing out last week with the game, they played Washington. Their pass defense has kind of been up and down, but they've allowed a lot of explosive plays in Seattle. Number 2 entering the week, and now they moved up to number 1 because they got that defense and torched them in terms of those chunk plays. So I feel like that's where you can take advantage. The next 2 games, a little bit tougher in that. The Cardinals top 10 against explosive passes, Rams top 5. But after that, like a game against the Titans, where maybe most teams you're kind of worried about like the blowout factor. But I think that in that matchup, they can blow them out partially because Shaheed has those 2 big plays in the first half or something like that.
And last thing with Rashid Shaheed, that I think we haven't maybe talked about enough on this show since the trade happened. I do think a part of why they went out and got Rashid Shaheed is to get more too high looks, right? They want to get a safety out of the box. They they do want to open things up for the run game. At some point they're going to need to be a better run team, and because they throw out of base so much, like that's great, and it's why they've been the most efficient passing team in the NFL. Is because they get a bunch of base defense looks because they play these heavy personnel packages we were talking about earlier. But at the same time, if they can spread the field, add more receiving options, that's going to create more rushing lanes. So if you're hoping for that second half of the season, Kenneth Walker, get him out of the coping corner, or you're a Zach Charbonnet sicko, maybe Shaheed can help in that regard. Joel, what do you think about that theory?
I love that. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. I don't want to get my hopes up, but I do love you bringing that up, especially and from an NFL perspective. I do like this trade for Seattle in general, like the points you just brought up, but just as an overall receiver, the Saints traded a 4th-round pick for like Valet this offseason, and he obviously wasn't doing too much behind Shaheed, and then they trade Shaheed for basically the same amount. So I like it from an NFL perspective too.
No question. Okay, let's stick in the trades here for your third player with some buzz.
It's going to be Jacobi Meyers, and a lot of it just going back to Brian Thomas Jr. I think I've lost all of my hope on Brian Thomas Jr. I've tried to stay positive, try to stay hopeful. At least he's had his moments. But after the injury last week, after not doing the greatest up until that injury with no Travis Hunter, then they trade for Jacobi Meyers. There is not much to be excited about. So when we're looking at Brian Thomas Jr. real quick, his short area targets have gone way down this year. And I feel like some people miss that part because we don't think of Brian Thomas Jr. as like a screen guy. But last year he had a lot of screens. It was like 18, 17 screens. Yeah. This year he's got 1. In terms of his like short area targets, under 5 yards, like 5 yards or under, he's 52nd among receivers, not even getting two a game. So it's just all of those downfield shots, those intermediate shots, which are good, but like the chemistry is not really there and the volume isn't there on top of it. So it makes it hard to trust, especially when you're bringing in Jacoby. Like maybe with no Strange and no Hunter, he gets some of those short targets, and I don't really think that's happening anymore.
It's just it's such a great point about the screens. He averaged 10 yards per target on screens last year, Brian Thomas. I know that because I said that stat 1,000 times in the offseason because Liam Cohen was such a good screen designer last year in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
You think, okay, Brian Thomas is going to get that. But I think because of the problems that he's shown this year, going over the middle, playing against zone coverage, and dropping the football in those scenarios, they've had to take so much off of his menu. I think they probably wanted to put a lot on him. And then as he's underperformed, you mentioned like the lack of short targets. To me, Joel, that's because they've had to stick him at X receiver and run a very vertical straight line route tree, goes, curls, outs. And that's just not the best for fantasy, right? Especially with a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. You want that move around guy. He's been really good targeting the slot over the course of his career, has Trevor Lawrence. And now you've got two guys. Put Travis Hunter aside, we'll see when he comes back. But like right now, you've got Jacobi Meyers and Parker Washington, who are two slot flanker types. Like these guys, to me, are going to be the load-bearing players for the next few weeks. Real quick, what do you think is going to happen with this receiver room when Travis Hunter gets back? Because to me, I was like, oh, Hunter's going to come back if they make a playoff run. But it sounds like Ian Rappaport says he's going to miss the next 3 weeks for sure, but he could be back shortly after. Can you piece together what this receiver room looks like if we have Myers, Parker Washington, BTJ, and Travis Hunter? Like, what does that look like?
I don't think I could accurately. I think they would keep Travis Hunter in the slot would be my first guess in terms of even long-term, like who's most important to this team and the role that's been a little bit more limited up until these last couple of weeks. Like keep him inside where he's comfortable and then have Jacobi Meyers go outside. That'd be my best guess, but it does make it difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I actually think that makes a lot of sense. And it lines up with what Liam Cohen said today, that they're going to start Jacobi Meyers outside because it's easier to learn that position in this offense because it's less of the move around stuff. Okay, we got two more guys to get through here. Let's hit your fourth player that's got some buzz.
It's going to be Romeo Doubs. I feel like you're a fan, aren't you, Matt Harmon, of Doubs?
Yes, I have really been impressed with him this season. He has really, really grown on me.
All right, that's good to hear then. That's good to hear before I say all this positive stuff about him. I like him. Not the greatest matchup this week, especially now. Like maybe DeJean moves outside, so like Philly, a little tougher matchup there. But when we're looking at this team, like Tucker Kraft sadly goes down. I love that man. And then you don't have Matthew Golden, Wicks is hurt, Jaden Reed's hurt. Like everybody's hurt, all their wide receiver twos. So does he not become a wide receiver two anymore? He had that 3 touchdown game in week 4, and I know that's a 3 touchdown game, but he hasn't had one since. So when we're actually looking at like the expected touchdowns, he's right at it. So he's not necessarily overperforming. And since that week 4 game, top 13 and 13th in target share, 13th in production overall. So those numbers have been there. The air yards have been there. The target share is there. And that main thing is that red zone target share. Like when he had that really good touchdown season a couple of years ago, when he had 8 touchdowns, I think a lot of that was because of that red zone work. Tucker Kraft was leading this team at 32%, Doubs at 27%, and nobody else was even close to those two.
I love it. Yeah, as we're trying to figure out, okay, how did the Packers replace Tucker Kraft? Is it going to be with more 12 personnel? Fitzpatrick and then, Luke Musgrave. How does that work together? Well, who's going to be the wide receiver too? Is it going to be more of a deep guy like Christian Watson? Or are they going to try to get one of the more layup guys? The one guy who's never leaving the field is Romeo. Like he's going to be out there. So I love to hear that he's also kind of a positive regression candidate because of those touchdowns. He's definitely somebody that I think is an underrated fantasy starter right now as a wide receiver 3 flex play, and maybe even more than that if the season continues to go the way it is. All right, we have one more player to get to here, a player that's actually on a bye right now.
Yeah, I just want to touch real quickly on Chase Brown. There's been 2 pros in this new offense with Flacco. The big thing right now actually is just Pirine going down to injury. He's playing a lot more and he's getting all of that work. So if he can get that receiving volume, that's the key there. But with Flacco under center, it's the increased passing volume and then the rushing efficiency. He is number 1 in the entire NFL in yards per carry since Flacco took over. I was shocked to see that. It hasn't been a ton of work, like 45 carries, but compared to being basically dead last to number 1 in the NFL, I'll take that. It's just a different offense in general with Flacco in there. And we saw that 14 target game without P. Ryan. Not that it's going to be 14 targets every week, but I think it does help him a lot, especially with that upcoming schedule. Like, we get Baltimore twice for Chase Brown, 32nd against receiving running backs. So it's one of those, they haven't been good against running backs, but it's like, they're Baltimore. Can the Bengals keep up with that offense? It's going to be a lot less rushing, but that is where you can attack them, is in that receiving running backs. He gets Miami in the playoffs as well. So it helps a lot when you can get that receiving volume, especially if P. Ryan misses more time.
Love it. That's a great call. And I am mysteriously, suspiciously, perhaps over-invested in Chase Brown in one of my guillotine leagues. So I'm hoping I can survive this week and exploit all of that goodness that you were talking about here going forward once he comes off that bye. All right, that's going to do it for Buzz's Building. Joel, shout out to you. Great stuff this week. Really enjoyed all of the topics.